What's up, addicts? All right, going through our recap of day 2 and rounds 2 and 3. Massive day for the running backs in this draft class. Saw a lot of current existing assets see their values take a nosedive, but man, did we get a lot of really good landing spots for some of the top running backs in this draft. We're going to run down each skill position pick. I'm going to get over the bitterness that I have with the Packers trolling me right now with the worst draft in the history of drafts. But we'll go skill position pick, or just fantasy relevant picks by pick. Starting with T. Higgins, going to the Cincinnati Bengals. I actually really like this. Doesn't have that top end speed that AJ Green brings, but is a bigger bodied guy that can win at the point of the catch and is a red zone monster. So I really think this is a good move on the Bengals' part. Give Joe Burrow some young weapons to be able to develop with. I think T. Higgins ends up matching up really nicely there with Joe Burrow. So he sees a massive boost to his fantasy value. This will probably hurt Tyler Boyd a good bit. John Ross's stock just completely tanked, and AJ Green is probably on the outs next year. So look for T. Higgins to have a hopefully pretty quick adjustment to this offense. All right, and then very next pick, Michael Pittman from USC. Big, fast, and more of your prototypical X receiver. This is really good for Indianapolis, building for the future. Not really sure who their quarterback of the future is going to be quite yet. Obviously, they have Phillip Rivers this year. I think that Michael Pittman will be able to fit in there fine. They definitely needed wide receiver depth last year, having Zach Pascal as your wide receiver 1 once T.Y. Hilton and Paris Campbell were both down. Not good. So glad to see that they went wide receiver first. I think that was definitely a position of need for them. There are a few receivers I like better than Pittman here, but I do think Pittman was a pretty good pick for them overall. Then we see DeAndre Swift go to the Lions. Now, this was a spot that I was projecting a guy like Taylor to go to. DeAndre Swift seems like a very interesting fit for me. We know Matt Patricia typically likes to run committees. He doesn't like to give all the carries to one guy, so I do fear that with Swift going there, this is just going to be a way that they can continue to use Kerryon and Swift together. I think Swift is a much better running back than Kerryon, and he could definitely find some success here, but the Lions aren't a great team, and running backs on bad teams typically end up not being as good. So I feel like of all the running backs and the top tier that went to a team today, I think this was the worst landing spot. DeAndre Swift kind of took a plummet for me in the rankings, as we'll see as we get to more of the other picks. But then the very next skill position pick we saw, again, the Colts come up to trade up to take Jonathan Taylor, the running back out of Wisconsin. This is a phenomenal landing spot for Jonathan Taylor. That offensive line there in Indianapolis is great. It's a little bit of ambiguity again in terms of what quarterback is going to be playing, and they still have Marlon Mack there, so it's going to be a little interesting this first year to see how those carry splits go. I don't think that they're just going to bench Marlon Mack, especially because they still have him on contract for another year. No reason to just let him sit there on the bench. But Jonathan Taylor will see work this year and could take over this backfield at some point during the year. So this sucks if you own Marlon Mack, but great landing spot for Jonathan Taylor with this offensive line. If the Colts can secure a quarterback sometime between now and next year that gives this team a lot of promise, this could be an even better pick. But really think that this now brings Jonathan Taylor back in that top tier and will definitely be the 101 for a lot of people's boards. I think he falls pretty much in a tie now with Clyde Edwards-Helaire over there in Kansas City. Again, that landing spot was just perfect for Clyde, but really like Jonathan Taylor going to the Colts. And then we see Laviska Shenault go to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Very interesting pick. I really like this for them, giving another fast, big-bodied guy on the outside there. So DJ Chark and Laviska Shenault going to go in tandem here. This might hurt Chark slightly because this isn't projecting to be an incredibly high-volume pass team, but they did just let Marquise Lee go, so I think Laviska Shenault is an upgrade from Marquise Lee for them. I think they're really just trying to put weapons around Gardner Minshew and see can he actually be their quarterback of the future. So really like that pick for them. We see Cole Kmet go to the Bears. The Bears now have 10 tight ends. Not going to say too much about this. Tight ends are kind of worthless right now in fantasy of the ones that are being drafted in this class. So probably not really going to be thinking about him outside of like a third, fourth round pick. Then we see KJ Hamler go to the Denver Broncos. Now the Denver Broncos were looking to potentially draft Henry Ruggs. Well, the Raiders took him, and then they ended up getting Jerry Jeudy. But I think KJ Hamler has a lot of interesting skill sets that are pretty emblematic of what we saw with Ruggs. Incredibly quick, is definitely a field stretcher. So you got Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy there now. KJ Hamler can be able to stretch the field, and Noah Fant, 2 running backs with Melvin Gordon and Philip Lindsay. They went all in on giving Drew Lock all the weapons that he possibly needs. They're going to know very quickly whether or not Drew Lock is the future of this team or whether he is garbage and they can move on. So the Broncos are going to be a fascinating team to watch. But really like that pick there. And then the Steelers take Chase Claypool. A little bit of an interesting choice there, but the Steelers always seem to know more than what we do when it comes to wide receivers. So I'm not going to judge this pick quite yet until we see it. They take a really big-bodied guy that a lot of people had projected that he would end up having higher draft capital if he went as a tight end, but he got drafted as a receiver, so apparently it doesn't matter. We'll see what the Steelers can do with him. They've already talked about potentially letting Juju walk next season, so Chase Claypool could see a boost to his fantasy value in future years, and also depending on how well James Washington develops. But this could be James Washington getting the axe if Chase Claypool takes over for his spot on the outside with Juju in the slot and Deontay Johnson in the X. So interesting, really curious to see how that goes. All right, and then the next huge move here, Cam Akers goes to the Los Angeles Rams to take over for Todd Gurley. Now, I was very excited about this pick. I was a little bit bummed out seeing where Swift went, but then seeing Cam Akers go to the Rams, this is really good for his value. And he goes before J.K. Dobbins, which is a little bit interesting. But the Rams take Akers there. Now, they've already talked about wanting to do a form of a committee, so that might still be a little bit problematic, but overall Cam Akers is clearly better than Darrell Henderson or Malcolm Brown. So I do think Cam Akers will end up getting the majority of the workload in this backfield. Now the Rams O-line is still not, it was pretty bad last year, and they haven't done much to improve it in the offseason. So the Rams offense is still going to be a little bit of a question mark heading into 2020, but I do think that Cam Akers did see a massive boost to his value with this pick going to the Rams. Very next pick, we see the Eagles take Jalen Hurts. I guess they wanted to make sure they had a quarterback for the playoffs because Carson Wentz gets hurts every year. Yeah, I get it. Gets hurts. He gets hurt every year. So, yeah, very interesting pick here. Lots of Eagles fans mad about this one, but get over it. The Packers drafted Jordan Love, traded up for him, and drafted him at the first round. So now you can feel some of our pain. This definitely hurts his draft value unless you don't believe in Carson Wentz, hoping he would go to a team where he'd at least have a shot at taking over. I don't think there's much of a chance for that. All right, and then J.K. Dobbins goes to the Baltimore Ravens. When it comes to running backs, you have to remember one thing. And yes, he went after Swift, he went after Akers, he went after Jonathan Taylor. But when it comes to running backs, same thing that we have going on with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. When a running back goes to a really, really good team, that matters almost more than anything else, as long as they have the talent to do what they need to do. A running back on a fantastic team is always going to trump a running back on a bad team unless they're just getting absolutely force-fed the ball. Volume obviously is very important, but running backs are super game script dependent. Going to a team like the Ravens that have improved their defense, they still have Lamar Jackson there. This is going to be a team that loves to run the ball. J.K. Dobbins is going to have wide open running lanes, is going to have to beat out Mark Ingram this year, who's 30 going on 31, I believe, so it shouldn't take too long for him to take over the backfield. This is an absolute plummet for the draft capital of Justice Hill, unfortunately. If you were hanging on to him, he pretty much already went to the grave, but J.K. Dobbins there absolutely skyrockets for me anyway, goes up. I have him now at running back number 3 outside of Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jonathan Taylor. Going to Baltimore was the absolute best landing spot for him and should project to be a fantastic asset, especially even if not in this first year. If Mark Ingram ends up playing the season, next year is going to be just absolutely destructive for J.K. Dobbins being on the Ravens. The Ravens are killing it in this draft. Makes me sad, but love that J.K. Dobbins pick there. That's fantastic. All right, and then we see Denzel Mims. I'm sorry, I'm jumping too soon. Van Jefferson goes to the Los Angeles Rams. Interesting pick here, taking him over Denzel Mims. Don't have much to say there. Kind of having to replace the targets. They go to Brandon Cooks. We'll see how that fit is there with the Rams, but really excited for Denzel Mims getting to go and be the alpha receiver there in New York. I think this is a great fit for him, and although I don't like the Jets, I do think this is a really good move on their part. I think that this will be a true teller to see if Sam Darnold is for real. Can't make excuses anymore now that they're finally giving him a #1 option to throw to. I think this is a great move for Denzel Mims. He's going to be a sneaky pick in this draft, even though he fell a little bit in the actual draft. And then the Packers screw up and take A.J. Dillon. They already have Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams, so why not get a 2-down grinder back that doesn't have much of a profile of catching the ball. They say he can catch the ball. He probably can, but at the end of the day, Packers desperately needed a receiver here, and they punt and take a running back. So A.J. Dillon is going to be a contested pick in fantasy. I don't have him ranked very high, and going to the Packers, I don't think that really does much for helping his value, but this definitely hurts Aaron Jones. A.J. Dillon is most likely going to see a lot of work near the goal line, and that was what made Aaron Jones the #2 running back last year with a massive amount of touchdowns, so look for major touchdown regression for Aaron Jones. All right, and then getting into the 3rd round, definitely a few other things here. Antonio Gibson, running back wide receiver prospect, going to the Washington Redskins. There's so many gadget guys on the Redskins right now. I don't really know how this is going to end up fitting for them, but I do like Antonio Gibson a lot. Pay attention to that depth chart as it goes out, but this is really just a high flyer pick if you take him in your rookie drafts. And then we see Keyshawn Vaughn go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is actually a pretty undersung move for fantasy. The Buccaneers were one of the prime landing spots for a running back. We all thought maybe they'd take Swift. And then in the 2nd round, we were thinking maybe they'd take J.K. Dobbins or Cam Akers. They bypassed both of them, and then they grabbed Keyshawn Vaughn out of Vanderbilt. I think this is going to be a really good move for fantasy. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Keyshawn Vaughn ends up being the #1 fantasy rookie running back in redraft leagues this year, just considering how much the Buccaneers are pushing all their chips into the center of the table to try to win the Super Bowl this year. I don't know how long of a shelf life he's going to have. Obviously, with Tom Brady only being there for 2 years, we don't really know what the Buccaneers will hold following Brady's exit. But overall, I think Keyshawn Vaughn is going to be a value in drafts. You should be able to get him near the late back end of the 1st round. And if he falls to the 2nd, that's an absolute steal. And then we see the Raiders take back-to-back picks with Lynn Bowden and Bryan Edwards. Lynn Bowden, kind of another one of your gadget players, but incredibly athletic and very, very interesting, kind of a Taysom Hill type guy that plays quarterback, running back, and wide receiver, and is good on kick returns. And then they take Bryan Edwards, one of my favorite receivers out of this class. So they completely reshaped their wide receiver room. Now they have Henry Ruggs, Lynn Bowden, and Bryan Edwards there, alongside Hunter Renfrow and Tyrell Williams. So if Derek Carr is going to do it, this is his last opportunity, but they gave him a heck of a lot of weapons there. I like Bryan Edwards, honestly, the best of all these picks. I wouldn't be surprised if Bryan Edwards ends up being the most productive receiver there in Las Vegas out of all 3 of their picks, at least from a fantasy perspective. And then we see Zack Moss go to the Buffalo Bills. I really don't think too highly of Zack Moss in terms of fantasy prospects. I think he's just going to take over that Frank Gore role, and it's not really going to do too much to move the needle for him, but it definitely does hurt Devin Singletary. Again, another one of those running backs that sees a dip in his fantasy value because Zack Moss will likely get some work near the goal line. So kind of stinks for Devin Singletary truthers out there, but it could have been worse. They could have taken Jonathan Taylor or a guy like that. So like I said, it could have been worse, but still not really ideal if you own Devin Singletary. Don't really want to mention any of the tight ends. It hurts my heart too much. But we see Devin Duvernay go to the Baltimore Ravens. It's going to be an interesting upside pick. The Ravens obviously still need help at the wide receiver position. with Lamar Jackson only throwing to tight ends and then them shipping off Hayden Hurst. Marquise Brown is going to be your seam stretcher. You don't want him leading your team in catches. So Devin Duvernay there, another guy out of the slot, but should end up being a decent volume guy there for Lamar Jackson. And then Darren Tevin goes to the Tennessee Titans, a good backup for Derrick Henry there. Really like Darren Tevin coming out of Appalachian State. His prospect was kind of all over the place, but I do think that he can definitely give the Titans the ability to have a running back that they can trust when Derrick Henry needs to take a breather, or if he for some reason gets hurt. Do you think Darren Tevin could step in and take over that role pretty well? Definitely not as big or as quick as Derrick Henry, but has a really good profile around him. So for the last skill pick in the draft, I think Darren Evans is going to be a nice second or third round pick that you can just take, and then potentially even takes over that backfield next year after Derrick Henry is off of his rookie or off of his franchise tag. So that's pretty much it in terms of fantasy relevant players. I guess I'll mention Adam Troutman went to the New Orleans Saints as a tight end. He'll probably end up being the #1 tight end drafted, him or Cole Kmet for fantasy. I like that landing spot there for the Saints. Jared Cook is still there, so he's not going to be relevant for at least a year or two, but most tight ends typically take a little while before they actually develop into fantasy assets. So to recap, we saw a drop in value for wide receivers. Guys like Auden Tate and John Ross are basically dead in the water. I think Tyler Boyd takes a little bit of a hit there with T. Higgins coming in. Paris Campbell takes a little bit of a hit with Michael Pittman coming in there. Kerryon Johnson, complete nosedive in his value. Marlon Mack, complete nosedive. DJ Chark, I don't think takes too much of a hit with Laviska Shenault there, maybe slightly. KJ Hamler doesn't really do much to move the needle against guys like Cortland Sutton. Chase Claypool, I think, really hurts the value of James Washington. Cam Akers obviously destroys Darrell Henderson hype. He's pretty much dead in the water now. J.K. Dobbins absolutely smashes any value you had for Justice Hill or Gus Edwards. Denzel Mims, I think, definitely sees a boost in his value. I don't really know that you had a high value for Brashad Perriman already. A.J. Dillon tanks Aaron Jones' value a bit. Also really makes you wonder what they're going to do with Jamal Williams, because that was kind of the role that he was playing last year. So really just kind of head-scratching moves by the Packers all around. Antonio Gibson maybe hurts Darius Geis a little bit, but I mean, there's such different players, I don't really know that you'd say that much yet. Keyshawn Vaughn definitely hurts Ronald Jones, but still I think overall this Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense is just ascending. Bryan Edwards and Lynn Bowden, Hunter Renfro's stock is basically dead now. Tyra Williams, same thing. Honestly, probably going to be drop candidates here pretty soon. Really like Bryan Edwards there. Zack Moss hurts Singletary a little bit, but don't overreact to that move. Devin Duvernay, I don't think really does much to move the needle against anyone there in Baltimore. And tight end's not really doing much of anything for anybody. So yeah, very good draft for the running backs. As it stands right now, I'm going to have to do some charting and thinking this through in terms of projections for what this means for this year, but my instant reaction is now there are 6 running backs that are worth being drafted in the first round in fantasy drafts, and I believe that there are 3, probably, no, I should take that back. There are 2 tiers. There's the alpha tier, where you've got Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Jonathan Taylor, and J.K. Dobbins there, all in fantastic landing spots, great fits for them. And then the next tier, you have a mixture of really talented guys in moderate fits, or Keyshawn Vaughn in Tampa Bay, but we'll go Cam Akers in LA, DeAndre Swift in Detroit, and then number 6, Keyshawn Vaughn there in Tampa Bay with the best fit there. So 2 tiers, 3 running backs each. Nab those guys up. I have another video on my channel, you should check it out, where we go over the strategy of why running backs return value a lot quicker than wide receivers in fantasy drafts. I won't talk you into taking the guys in tier 2 over Lamb, but overall, I think you should be targeting running backs in the first round because you can always trade them when their value peaks for wide receivers who are still on a slow
upward trajectory towards their value peak. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. We're going to be doing a breakdown of the case for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, looking back over the entire history of Andy Reid running backs and using that as a potential projection and spot for what we think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to do there in Kansas City, and it is juicy. So be on the lookout for that, and just pray that my Packers find some way to redeem themselves, because unless they trade for Curtis Samuel, I'm pretty disappointed. Anyway, talk to you guys later, and we'll see you in the next video.